She was young, but not naive. Raised within the sacred walls of the temple, she lived in a world far from noise and chaos. Her name was Maryam, a name spoken in reverence by angels, a woman chosen not for wealth, but for her silence, her purity, her devotion. She belonged to no one, had no desires of fame. Her life was worship. Her soul was peace. But one day, peace broke. A presence entered her chamber, unfamiliar, radiant, yet unearthly. In that stillness, something divine was set in motion, not a conversation, but a decree. She was to carry a child, not through union, not through sin, but through command. It was a moment beyond reason, a moment where human understanding collapsed and only surrender remained. Her body trembled, but her soul submitted. For this was not humiliation. It was a miracle in disguise. Within her, life began to form. A soul destined to speak from the cradle, destined to heal the sick, raise the dead, and return at the end of time. But before all that, he was simply a heartbeat hidden beneath the ribs of a frightened girl, chosen by the heavens. The world would never see her the same. They would doubt her, accuse her, isolate her. But the sky had already spoken, and her womb was now home to a divine sign for all of humanity. This is how the story of ISA began, not with a voice from the clouds, but with silence and a girl strong enough to carry the truth. She carried no crime, but she was treated like a criminal. With each passing day, the miracle growing within her became harder to hide, not just from the world, but from her own reflection. Maryam's steps grew heavier, not just from the weight of a child, but from the whispers, from the eyes that used to look at her with respect, now burning with suspicion. They didn't see a miracle. They saw betrayal. A girl praised for her piety, now rumored to have stained her own name, but she spoke no words, not to defend herself, not to explain. Because how do you explain the impossible to those who've already decided you're guilty? So she left, alone, into the wilderness, into a place where no eyes could reach her, where only God could hear her cries, under the shade of a dry palm tree, far from her people, far from comfort. She collapsed, her body torn in pain, her heart crushed in sorrow. And in that moment, she wished for death. But despair was not the end of her story. As the world turned its back on her, heaven opened its mercy. From beneath her, a spring of fresh water began to flow. From above her, dates fell from the once barren palm. She was not abandoned. She was seen by the one who never needed proof of her innocence. And then it happened. In the solitude of exile, she gave birth. No midwife, no helping hand, just her and the will of God. A baby wrapped in purity, silent, but destined to speak. The world may never forgive her, but heaven had already honored her. What she carried was not shame. It was a sign, soon to speak for itself. This was the second beginning, the beginning of a voice that would break centuries of silence. She returned, Maryam, carrying a child in her arms, and 1,000 accusations on her shoulders. The village fell into chaos, outrage, disbelief. The girl they once called pure was now branded with shame. No man by her side, no wedding veil, just a baby and silence. Her people gathered, not to welcome her, but to judge her. Words cut through the air like knives. Their trust had turned into anger, their reverence into rejection. And through it all, she did not speak, not because she was weak, but because heaven had told her to be still. Because this time, Her defense would not come from her lips, but from the lips of the impossible. Then it happened. The newborn stirred. His eyes opened, not like a child, but like someone who had seen the truth before birth. And from the cradle, he spoke, not in gibberish, not in cries, but in clear, powerful words, declaring his identity, declaring his mission, declaring that he was a servant of God, born not from sin, but by divine command. And just like that, every mouth that cursed her was silenced. Every eye that judged her turned away in shame. This was not an ordinary child. This was the sign they asked for and still could not comprehend. A prophet in a cradle, a voice of truth before he could even walk. The miracle that stood between a mother and the mob. Maryam didn't need to explain. She never did, because sometimes the purest truth doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to be born. This was not just a child. This was Isa, and the world had just witnessed its first word from a messenger still in his mother's arms. He was no longer the infant in a cradle. He had grown into a boy with quiet eyes, who saw deeper than children should. The village never forgot the day he spoke, but time dulled their awe and sharpened their suspicion. Maryam raised him away from a noise, far from markets, far from mocking mouths, in the simplicity of life. Baking bread, gathering water, praying at dawn, the boy grew, not in noise but in light. He rarely played, not because he wasn't allowed, but because his heart was older than his age. He observed, he listened, and when he did speak, his words left grown men in silence. At 12, he vanished. Some said he traveled. Some said he studied in the temple. Some said he simply disappeared. But Maryam knew heaven was still writing his story, and some chapters must be written in solitude. There were no miracles in those silent years. No crowds, no disciples. Only time, waiting for the moment when prophecy would rise again. Many would question him. They would say, how could a baby be born without a father? And to them, the answer had already been whispered in the earliest verses of Revelation. If you doubt the miracle of Isaiah, then look to Adam, who was born without father and mother. God does not need permission to create life. When he wills a thing, he says to it, be. And it is. This was no myth, no legend. This was the story of a boy born to a mother who never sinned, chosen for a mission he had yet to speak, destined to return when the world most needs the truth. The world forgot him, but heaven did not. This was Isaiah, and his silence was only the breath before the storm of mercy.